Fort Myers, Florida, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Interstate 75 sits at a standstill, and this is during the off season. Heading to Lehigh or Cape Coral, this is the Fort Myers metropolitan area that was the fastest growing place in the United States a few years back. Commute times in the Fort Myers metropolitan area are on par with places like New York City. Located on the Caloosahatchee River, downtown Fort Myers was flooded during Hurricane Ian, and so were many of the adjacent districts like along Palm Beach Boulevard. According to a news report that just came out, Fort Myers has the second highest ratio of undocumented recent arrivals in the United States, with 1,700 people per every 100,000 being new arrivals, most of whom are now undocumented. Only the city of Miami had a larger influx of new immigrants. If you've been watching my YouTube channel for a while, you may remember that I've said that when it comes to the growth and expansion of Southwest Florida, a huge percentage of the buyers and commerce here was because of new arrivals. I was the first YouTuber to really push this concept when everybody else was telling you that it was New Yorkers that were buying up everything and moving down here. I was letting you guys know that no, it isn't New Yorkers, it's actually people from Latin America. So it's not a surprise that today the city of Fort Myers is an absolute ghost town, and particularly this district here along Palm Beach Boulevard. Many businesses have closed. In fact, the number of businesses that have closed here recently is astonishing. The end of influx of migrants also meant the end to the economy of the city. After all, that's what the new growth was based off of. Along this district, we're looking at restaurants that are gone, car dealerships that are gone, sales, retail, and the few businesses that are open are looking at empty parking lots. The economic decline of this district is clear and visible. This place is nothing what it was many years ago. Fort Myers has always been a miserable place. After all, the locals know it as Fort Misery, but over the last few years, the misery here has strengthened its grip on the city. At any given time, there are at least 70 people waiting at the Fort Myers Uber lot, where the waits rarely go below 30 minutes. On an average day, Uber drivers are waiting between 2 to 3 hours at the airport to pick up a passenger, and they gladly do that because there's no commerce in the city. Fort Myers is economically depleted. The decline of migrant communities has meant the decline of Fort Myers because Fort Myers became the new New York City of America. It was the new up-and-coming place where everybody wanted to be, and the growth analytics here topped the charts nationally. Here you can see a business plaza that has been for many years struggling, but now it's absolutely nothing. The only thing to do in this plaza is pick up undocumented migrant workers. Out of curiosity, I stopped and asked the guys that were standing around how much they're getting paid for labor. I told them that I had a small moving job and it would pay $20 an hour, and they told me that they wanted $40 an hour, so I skipped away quickly. Now, in the past, you could find 80 to 100 people here in the mornings waiting to get picked up. This was a day labor pickup spot because this is the heart of the Guatemalan community. Most of these guys are undocumented and they need work on the daily. I pulled up to these guys right here, made them the same offer, and they told me that they wanted to make at least $70. These guys that come up to you on the bicycles that look very eager are definitely a no. These are the type of guys you definitely don't want. They act like they're really eager to work. They'll say they'll work for anything, but then when you take them to the job sites, these are the guys that want more money, demand more, or simply don't want to do anything and then walk off the job sites or tell you that you need to bring them back. These guys are full-on scammers. You really got to know what you're looking for, and just because there's 10 guys there doesn't mean that any of them are actually going to work. But my point being that for the most part, these guys here sometimes want to make more money than somebody who has papers, even though they don't have a lot to bring to the table. As we pass this little business here, you can see it's abandoned. Many years back, this used to be a car dealership with Venezuelan and Dominican flags up front, but today it's completely run down and empty. The next business there, it's the same deal. At some point, it was a car dealership, and it's gone today. Right here used to be a little Cuban restaurant that was packed. It's almost dead. They changed hands, new owner. It's never been the same. And that's really the story for all these businesses. As we drive down this street, there are so many businesses that were and today are gone. Several years back, I was clearing an empty lot that I own in Lehigh Acres, Florida, and I picked up a few guys there, and they ended up not wanting to work and demanding more money. I literally had to bring them back. It's crazy to think how it used to be really hardworking immigrants. Like many years ago, if you picked up somebody in one of these day labor spots, I would almost always pay them extra money on top of what I told them I would pay them because of how hard they worked. But recently, the guys you get here just seem to try to exploit you. Without a doubt, the number one industry that has taken the biggest hit here has been used car dealerships. There's a little plaza here that today sits abandoned, and this plaza used to be car dealerships many years back. They also used to sell trailers and all types of food trucks and stuff like that. That business is completely gone. And well, the issue with Fort Myers, particularly this district, has always been a saturation of the same type of businesses. The only three things that seem to go in here are Latin restaurants, Latin food trucks, and used car dealerships. And well, this oversaturation of the same type of businesses means that you're competing so much that the businesses literally become unprofitable. So why were there so many used car dealerships in Fort Myers? Well, most of them are what's known as a buy here, pay here. If you've never heard this term, a buy here, pay here is a type of used car dealership where they finance the car personally. It means that the person buying the car doesn't usually have credit, many times don't have documents. It's literally like they own the car and they're selling it to you directly, and they are also financing the car to you. So while the interest rates are already maxed out, they can't squeeze any other dollar out of your sale. What they do is, because it's not a bank financing it, it's the dealership themselves. So the person that's selling you the car literally owns the car. These used to be little resorts right here, and they're also closed down. But let's say that you arrive to the United States and you want to drive around in a Hummer. You don't have a license, you don't have credit, you don't have anything. You're undocumented, but now you're in the United States and you want to drive around in a red freaking Hummer on 28s. Now this Hummer's already got 200,000 miles on it, so it's really only worth like $16,000 or $18,000. But they're going to sell it to you for $30,000, and your payments will not be monthly, they'll be weekly. They squeeze $5,000 or $6,000 out of you for the down payment, and now you're good to go. The issue with weekly payments is that you're almost guaranteed to even forget it at some point, and within 1 or 2 hours of you missing that payment, they literally have a tow truck whose job it is to take that car instantly. Many times people feel that if their car payment is behind a few days, or if it's due on Friday but you come in on Monday, that it'll be okay. What they don't realize is that these guys, as soon as you don't make your car payment, instantly they come out and they repossess the car and put it back on the lot to sell it to somebody else who's also undocumented. So this was kind of like a win for the undocumented person who could land in the United States and instantly get a used car. Even though they were paying a premium, they would most likely never pay off the car. Chances are it would get repoed before they even got a chance to pay it off. But the point being that the people that came to the United States could instantly get into a brand new freaking Hummer. You'll notice for rent signs everywhere in Fort Myers. This one particularly is right outside of downtown. Now, while downtown Fort Myers has had a lot of revitalization, it's still a horrible housing market. See, with the undocumented people leaving, it isn't just the used car dealerships that are struggling, it's also the landlords. Every single type of business, as you're driving through Fort Myers, it's clear that businesses have been closing left and right. And well, it really isn't just undocumented people. This dealership right here used to be called Grant Motors. They're currently gone. It was also people who were broke and wanted to stunt. And if there's anything you should know about people in the hood, is that they're broke, but they still want to stunt. So whether it's undocumented people or just completely irresponsible people, even the freaking Enterprise places had to leave this area. There used to be a little food truck there, a little Mexican place many years back, and it's still there. You can see the Mexican flags. But right behind it, there used to be a Southern barbecue truck, a huge truck that was there for many years. That's completely gone now. I mean, the issue with the economy in Fort Myers is both the rents, the businesses, everything here was kind of aimed at people who were either undocumented or completely reckless. See, over the years, everybody in Southwest Florida knows if you mess up your credit, you get a couple evictions, or maybe a good old criminal record, the only option you got left is to live in the hood in Fort Myers. And well, this has just been what this area has been attracting for many years. Undocumented people, people with criminal records, or people who have screwed up their credit beyond any repair. These are the districts and businesses that aim at these individuals. As we head south on Fowler, eventually the area becomes more suburban and you see more large car dealerships and more, well, not so much business informality. But these were business districts that were busy and packed, and despite the predatory nature of many of the businesses that were out here, it's an economy that functioned for a lot of people who were, well, basically reckless. Being reckless and economically irresponsible kind of became the economical theme of the city. Welcome to South Fort Myers. If you look to the right, you can see that almost all these businesses are empty, and it is on a weekday. Now, these businesses here were extraordinarily packed and busy areas, but again, many of the customers here were undocumented. And today, while this area does have new Culvers and new car washes, when you get back into the neighborhoods here, it looks pretty much like a complete freaking ghost town. That's because most people here were undocumented, and the Lee County Sheriff's Office has been targeting this area. This community is called Pine Manor, but everybody calls it Crime Manor. This neighborhood's been horrible for years. Gangs, homicides. If it's bad, it's happening here. First, it was on a state level. SB 1718 was heavily implemented in this neighborhood. The Lee County Sheriff Marcino said that he was going to get rid of this neighborhood's reputation and it would no longer be called Crime Manor, and he was going to clean up this neighborhood. Many years after that statement, things have actually got worse here. It seems that when the hardworking undocumented people got pushed out, it left a vacuum filled with what? Gangbangers, criminals, and well, all of the riffraff that usually ends up in Fort Myers gets vacuumed into this neighborhood, and conditions here actually went from bad to worse. It's almost laughable if you go back now and hear his statements about how he was going to clean up this neighborhood. What he did was actually create a vacuum that sucked up all the bad and turned a bad neighborhood into an even worse one. Recently, there have been shootings and even homicides in this neighborhood, and despite the fact that law enforcement presence is heavy here, well, criminal activity is even more present. Now, today we're seeing immigration things happen on a national level, but this was the premiere. This is where immigration first started to take effect in the United States. The state of Florida, with laws like SB 1718, preceded the current administration's ICE immigration efforts, and the Lee County Sheriff said he was going to run with it and that this neighborhood would be the example of what would happen when you got rid of undocumented people. The issue is that there are still a crapload of undocumented people here, and now you actually have in that community also a little bit of racial diversity. You got some black criminals, you got some white criminals, well, you have some U.S. citizen criminals, well, you have all types of criminals. And this has created a dynamic where now these neighborhoods have literally become gang battlegrounds, as it used to just be mostly hardworking Hispanics. Now you have all ethnicities, all races mixed into one neighborhood, and it's made the place extraordinarily volatile, with racial tensions being so high in the United States, particularly in Florida. This concoction of all different races and different gangs has turned a horrible neighborhood into an absolute nightmare. Literally, the exodus of migrants because of the Lee County Sheriff's Office created a vacuum that sucked up all types of criminals into this neighborhood looking for affordability, and that kicked off a spiral of violence and warfare in this neighborhood. And well, things have always been bad here, but like I said, it possibly couldn't get worse. For rent signs are everywhere, and you see less Hummers driving through the city. Things in Fort Myers look emptier than they've ever been, and while you still see food trucks here or there, you can definitely tell that the Hispanic economical impact or economical boom that this area had no longer exists. Fort Myers feels vacant, it feels empty, and even then at rush hour along the main commuter routes, you can still be stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic despite the fact that the city's empty. That is because all the growth and development that happened in the metropolitan area, very little infrastructure came into play, meaning that along the major commute routes, things are horrible. So while in the city the streets are empty, if you're commuting from home to work, you're expecting an absolute nightmare of a commute, making Fort Myers perhaps one of the most irritating places to live anywhere in the United States when it comes to traffic congestion. And this is now in the off season. In the winter, when the snowbirds come down, the entire city paralyzes, and getting around this town becomes hour to an hour and a half more than what it is during this time of year. It really is an absolute nightmare commuting across Fort Myers. If you live in Southwest Florida, you know that you don't move to Lehigh or Cape Coral if you have to commute, because your life will literally be a nightmare. Apparently, all the people that moved to these places didn't get that memo from the realtors, and they soon found out that they couldn't get work in Lehigh or Cape Coral. Big surprise. Most of them are having to commute as far as Naples for work, meaning commutes longer than New York City, but incomes on par with Mississippi and Alabama. Many people discovered that Fort Myers wasn't for them, and while after COVID there was an economical boom from people moving here, a lot of those people figured out things really weren't working out for them. Then about 3 years ago, Fort Myers gets hit by Hurricane Ian. While the hurricane definitely didn't help, it certainly wasn't the only thing wrong with this real estate market. On top of that, most of the growth in the Fort Myers area happened in places that did not have utilities like city water or city sewage. So places like San Carlos Park, this was kind of a bedroom community just south of Fort Myers, where there just happens to be some infrastructure. Prices here skyrocketed. So St. Carlos Park is known for their famous arches. Now they're green. I remember they used to be red and white. I kind of like the old look more. Does anybody agree with me on that? The point being that today, this area has become extraordinarily expensive because it's an older grid pattern that actually had city utilities, meaning that if you want to live in the Fort Myers area, you don't want to live in the hood, you're going to pay a premium. But driving along US 41, even here in the nicer part of Fort Myers, a lot of car dealerships and businesses have had to close down as well. Now, despite this area being about 7 miles inland because of a few creeks that come around, the water from the ocean actually made it to US 41, right here where we are right now. The night that Hurricane Ian hit Fort Myers, I drove from Lehigh to Naples along US 41, and literally the storm surge came right up to the crest of the road on US 41, meaning that many businesses in South Fort Myers actually flooded, and this area just hasn't been able to recover from so much damage. It was completely unprecedented. A 15-foot storm surge has never been seen in the Fort Myers area, and well, to this day, many businesses, even in nicer areas, are still struggling. That's the city of Fort Myers for you, a city that is definitely in decline. Businesses are vacant, real estate volume is increasing, and real estate prices still don't correlate with the reality of living in a place known as Fort Misery to the locals. Hurricane Ian also decimated the coastline, and the so much beautiful beaches that people allegedly claim that this area had have become ecological disasters. The amount of contamination that went into the waterways means that it went from clear beaches to literally algae and garbage and debris in the water. And even many years later, there are still dozens, if not hundreds, of abandoned vessels. It's actually a complete mess ecologically. 3 years after Hurricane Ian, and on the north side of the Caloosahatchee Bridge, there's still dozens of boats piled up, sunk in the water. The beaches and waterways and pristine estuaries were really the icing on the cake for living in the Fort Myers area, and Hurricane Ian had just innumerable economical impacts, but it also had ecological impacts, and those, there's no end in sight, there's no recovery. To properly recover from Hurricane Ian, the state of Florida had to spend billions of dollars with ecological cleanup efforts. I mean, guys, there are still 3 years later hundreds of boats abandoned all along the coastline of Lee County that the county hasn't done anything about, the state of Florida hasn't done anything about, and they're not gonna do anything about it. So when you have the ecological destruction aftermath of Hurricane Ian and the state completely ignores that, then you get all the red tide, you get all the garbage on the beaches, none of that gets cleaned up. They do just kind of a mediocre effort, but nothing intensive to recover from the aftermath of this hurricane. You have an absolute ecological disaster. And what made Fort Myers be a place that people wanted to be was the ecological beauty, the beaches, the pristine coastlines, and now these beaches are a complete freaking landfill. On top of that, over the last few years, beach parking has become even more difficult here because the privatization of coastlines. Today on social media, let's take a look at a few of the posts that are going on, just so you guys can understand how relevant this issue is to people in the community. Now, this banner is going all over social media today. It shows an angry woman saying, "Get off my beach. I donated to the Lee County Commissioners." And this is really the privatization of beaches. The rich people want the beaches all to themselves. And what the rich people are doing is that they're getting rid of free parking, or beaches in areas that used to be free, you now have to pay or park further, or they're getting rid of all the beach parking to make sure that the regular working class people are not able to go to the beaches in Lee County. The other post on social media today is a map that shows the hundreds of signs that they've put up along the Lee County coastline to make sure that people aren't able to park near the beaches. So the idea is the privatization of beaches by the wealthy. And well, literally, if you're going to the beaches in Fort Myers, you're paying $7 to $12 to park. And some places like Fort Myers Beach, as much as $20 an hour. And that's pathetic when you consider places like Bradenton and Sarasota have better beaches with free parking. This has really been like the nail in the coffin of Fort Myers. The fact that not only are the coastlines destroyed, but then the few little pieces of sand that exist, the rich people keep swallowing it up. And if you live in Fort Myers, you know the beaches are there, they exist, but good luck finding a parking spot. So if you really want to live in Lee County, Florida, the Fort Myers Metro, and be near the beaches, then you end up in places like Bonita Springs that have access to a few more beaches. But then you have literally during season, I'm not exaggerating, if you're here in Bonita Springs, to get to the beach in season, you need at least 45 minutes to an hour. If you're in Fort Myers, I'll give you a realistic example. Before Hurricane Ian, we lived in Lehigh Acres, and it took us an hour and 45 minutes to get onto Fort Myers Beach. And then when we got there, we couldn't find parking, so we really just went there for nothing. Literally 4 hours just to drive to the beach and back, and we couldn't find parking. So if you want to live in Bonita Springs where you have better access to beaches, houses that flooded several times are going for over $500,000. There's literally basic little houses in Bonita Springs that have flooded like 3 to 4 times within the last 10 years that are going for like $700,000, which basically means if you really want to live in Fort Myers and be near the beaches that are accessible and free parking, or at least not as congested, you're going to have to be in the $1 million ballpark. And the city of Fort Myers isn't really that much money. It's not worth it. It's a market that isn't worth it. So that's the reality of Fort Myers. It's overpriced. Interest of people like the wealthy who just want all the beaches to themselves, and of course the state's absolute dismissal of environmental concerns means that the city of Fort Myers, which many years ago was booming, today is an absolute to be avoided real estate market in the state of Florida. If you are considering moving to Florida, I've lived in Fort Myers, I've lived in Bradenton and Sarasota. We're still dealing with the aftermath of Milton and Helene up here in Sarasota and Bradenton, but I would never look back. It is a much better metropolitan area, and the real estate market up here, I believe, is a little bit more stable. Fort Myers saw an explosion, a lot of misinformation, and today it is seeing a decline that doesn't seem to have an end anytime soon. Even beautiful little places like Bonita Springs, where I spent over 20 years of my life, and I thought I would never leave my hometown or want to leave this area. Every time I go back here, it's an absolute aggravation dealing with traffic, the snobby rich people, and well, just all of the problems that we've created here. They tried to make this place luxurious and beautiful, and they really turned it into an absolute nightmare. And no matter how much beautification goes into places like Bonita Springs, Lee County, Florida is the type of place you should probably avoid if you don't want your life to be infinitely complicated. Shout out to everybody watching from the 239, checking out.